My name is Elena Pnevmonidou. I teach in the Department of Germanic and Slavic Studies at the University of Victoria, and I will talk about my general research areas and more specifically about the talk I presented at the first symposium, the first meeting of the members of the cluster on German Orientalisms. My talk was on the German Romantic author Friedrich Hoelderlin and on his novel Hyperion, which was published in the towards the very end of the 18th century. So my talk on Hyperion, Hoelderlin's Hyperion, German Romanticism, took place in the second panel of the symposium. The second panel was dedicated entirely to the Goethe period and German Romanticism. The first panel was very interdisciplinary, and it covered the 20th and 21st century and tried to bring together various discursive kind of disciplinary spaces, so social sciences as well as media studies and film studies. The second panel on the early 19th century, the Goethe period Romanticism, was much more literary and cultural historical in its take. So it had a talk on Goethe, it had a talk on Heine, and it had a talk on Hoelderlin. This difference has a reason. The 19th century panel was set up in particular because we want to, on the one hand, understand the roots of a particular discourse, a particular take on Orientalism, that is the German take on Orientalism. We want to see how it emerged and whether it gets re-invoked in contemporary discourses in the 21st century. Another reason for putting this particular panel together is that each of us in that second panel covered a very important canonical German voice from the early 19th century. Goethe, Heine, Hoelderlin. It is well established that these big figures of German cultural history had something to say about the Orient. So we need to know what they had to say about it, but, and perhaps even more importantly, we need to rethink what we think we know about their Orientalism. So we need a fresh set of eyes, as it were, in order to understand more better how complicated and heterogeneous the Orientalism actually was, but also in order to bring them into connection with the complicated, interdisciplinary, heterogeneous framework of the second panel that is related to the 21st century. Hoelderlin is a very important writer to consider in a cluster like ours that wants a new approach to the history of German Orientalism. What makes him so important is that he has been so much studied that one might think we know exactly what his Orientalism is, but as a matter of fact we need to completely rethink that, and rethinking what we think we know instantiates in many ways what needs to be done ultimately with German Orientalisms. Hoelderlin's Orient, people think, is something quite familiar to us. Hoelderlin's Orient is the mythological prehistory of Western civilization in many ways. Hoelderlin, in his novel Hyperion and in his poetry afterwards, is very much obsessed almost with Greek antiquity. Greek antiquity has nothing to do with the Middle East, but there is a prehistory to Greek antiquity, which is the Ionian, Homeric, Oriental, mythical, Egyptian, even mythical past, the prehistory to ancient Greece. So this is the Orient, Hoelderlin's Orient, that we think we know. However, when we look a bit more closely at Hoelderlin, and especially his novel, Hyperion, a different picture emerges. And the picture that emerges is that Hoelderlin is actually very aware of the cultural and philosophical discourses about the Orient in his own time, and that he wants, in the novel Hyperion, to reflect critically about the Western assumptions about the Orient. What is the novel Hyperion about? It is a novel that is actually set in the 18th century. It's about Greece, but it is not about ancient Greece in antiquity. It's about a Greek character in the 18th century in modern Greece looking for the ancient origins. So what is modern Greece in the 18th century? It's not what we associate with Athenian classicism, it's actually Turkish-occupied Greece. So Hoelderlin's Orient is really complicated because he has a protagonist who looks for a mythological concept, a mythological Orient, but at the same time he is confronted with also an Orient, a present Orient, that he wants to reject, which is the Ottoman Orient. So the novel Hyperion is actually about the collision of two irreconcilable conceptions of the Orient. One is desirable, it is connected to the imagination, to poetry, to fantasy, the myth, the mythical origin of our civilization in the past. And one is very much rejected, which is the Ottoman occupation of Greece in the present. So what I'm looking for is not, in other words, one single homogeneous discourse about the Orient in Hoelderlin, but I'm looking precisely at the friction that Hoelderlin very deliberately establishes between these two very irreconcilable conceptions of the Orient.